Hello, this is Jim Coppin with Rankin Technical College. This video is about JavaScript module concepts, and hopefully this will help with the JavaScript modules written test that's assigned for this week. So let's get started here. JavaScript modules are a fundamental feature in modern JavaScript development, providing a robust system for organizing and reusing code. At their core, modules allow you to break down your application to smaller independent files. By enabling modularity, JavaScript modules promote better code organization, enhance maintainability by isolating concerns and boost reusability across projects. That way, you can create a module. If you know it's going to be maybe used on multiple projects, instead of always having everything in your own code base, you can have some common type JavaScript files that use different modules. Whereas you just go ahead and bring in that common code base into your existing source, so that you can use some of those common modules. Okay, that's a good way to do that. So there's basically two different kinds of modules in JavaScript. There's the common JS modules and the ESM modules. Now, for this course, I highly recommend using the ESM modules. I know some students have been using the common modules, and you can tell a common module basically because you'll see require when we're doing our node packages. You'll see the word to require. If you ever see the word require, you're using common JS, the common JS modules. And then for exposing different functionality, for exporting those, you use module.exports, okay? Or the shorthand exports. Now, common JS modules emerged as a widely adopted module system primarily for server-side JavaScript environments, most notably popularized by Node.js. One of the big things that are different between common and ES modules is common uses the synchronized loading module, and ESM modules are asynchronous. Okay, they use a asynchronous loading mechanism. So the rest of this video and the concepts that we're going to be discussing and also using in the written test are based on the ESM modules. Okay, so ESM modules represent the official standardized module system integrated directly into the JavaScript language specification. Designed for universal application, ESM supports both browser and server environments. It utilizes explicit import and export statements, which are static in nature, allowing for better static analysis and optimization by build tools. Okay. Like I said, ESM employs a asynchronous loading mechanism. So let's talk a little bit about ESM modules and exporting. So exporting different data types and top-level items. JavaScript modules offer flexibility in what you can export. So you can export any top-level declaration. Okay, this includes function declarations, variable declarations, class declarations, and objects and arrays. Okay, all of these can be exported. Okay, as long as they are top level. Okay, top level declarations. So let's look at. Let's see if we want to look at any code. Let's see export function. So let's look at a little bit of code here for this. And we're going to look at the add in the Java calculator.js. right here. As you can see, we're just doing an export before the function name, before the function declaration here. So this is a named export, okay? And we're using the word export right there. So all of these here will be exported, okay? These were all exported modules, all right? Or exported functionality of the module, I should say. Okay. Also wanted to look at, there's basic operations. Let's see, here's basic operations. So this basic operations actually is using the default export. Okay, there's a default export you can use, but you only can use one default export per module. Okay, and here you're exporting your basic operations as default. So it's important that so that this is another way. We could have done these other ones the same way, okay? Instead of doing it like how we did export here, use the keyword there. We could just use a const to create, and we could have done it that way. But always remember, you only can have one default, okay? So it's crucial to understand that the export keyword can only be used at the top level of a module. Okay. You cannot place an export statement inside a function. Okay. Or if a block or any other block scope. So let's go look at that real quick. So here is an example. Now, I did want to kind of mention real quick. So for this course, we're going to be using modules that are pertinent for the work we're doing in this course, which is Node and React and so forth. Basically the MERN stack. So, but you can use modules without using Node, okay? But they become very popular to use with Node, okay? Now here in this code base, I don't have any Node packages. I'm not doing anything really with Node here, okay? This is just some basic JavaScript files that are basically all set up for this demonstration of modules. Now, but I will, so, actually we can test all this just by using basically an HTML file, and how we've did this before, especially like in the HTML course, where we just reference it in the HTML, the JavaScript, and then we can look at all our console statements within the browser, within the browser window. We can look at all our debug statements by using the developer tools, like within Chrome. But for this demonstration, I'm going to just use Node, just to run the different things here. So real quick here, let's see what we're doing here. Okay, so the app will actually run. I can run all this from this app.js. And here I've got this. So what I want to do is uncomment this. Uncomment this here. No, it's not going to work like I wanted to. That's okay. Just do it the manual way. Okay. So as you can see, without even having to run this, modifiers cannot appear here. Okay, modifiers. I was going to run it, but there's no reason to on this one, because it's going to basically tell you if you're within a block of code here, if you're within this function, or you're within this kind of block if statement, you cannot use export. Okay. So that's what it means. It has to be top level. Okay, top level of a module. All right. So specifying module paths and import statements. So after the from keyword in an import statement, we'll look at an import here in a second, you must specify the path of a module you intend to import. So the path can be a relative path, right? So in this case here, it's saying // right? And these paths instruct module loader to find the file relative to the importing module's location. Or you can use an absolute path, and that's where you pretty much have your whole directory structure of where it is. And obviously that's usually not a good idea, especially if you're, a lot of the students early on in the HTML course, sometimes we're using those absolute paths. The problem is that's only relative to your directory structure of your computer. You try to, you check that in, and the instructor tries to grade that. Well, that's not going to be, that full directory path probably doesn't exist on that instructor's computer. Or if you end up deploying something like we went ahead and put things out on GitHub, to view things out there on GitHub. And so, and then also, if you deploy to a cloud environment, right, it's not going to have that directory structure. That's why I usually probably best always to use a relative path. Okay. I'm not going to talk about this bare specifier. This is, there is a node module called Lodash, and that's kind of more relevant for that. So when importing modules that you create for browser-based ESM modules, you must include the JS file extension, okay? So let's just kind of look at that real quick, or other extensions, MJS. So if you kind of recall, early in this course, we went ahead and created some modules, MJS. So as long as you create a modules MJS, that's way especially when we're using Node, like I said, this is more from this perspective of this lecture is more from just basically JavaScript. It doesn't necessarily have to be Node. Modules are part of the JavaScript specification. They're not only used for Node apps, right? Applications. They can be used outside of that. But when we go ahead and use when we're using Node and stuff like that, we can use MJS. That way we don't have to add that, Node, the modules to the package.json file, right? So just want to point that out. But when importing modules, you can create for a browser-based ES modules, you must include the JS file extension. Okay, let's look at use for modules like the calculator. Let's look at the top here, the calculator. Okay, here we're not importing anything, but I know we will be over here in the app. And you've seen this already, obviously. Here, you're importing these different things. We've got these different files. We have a calculator file, a constants file. These are our imports. Okay, all right. We're importing basic math, and then we're also including add, PI, calculator. So let's just take a quick look at that. So basic math, right? So what happens here on this? So we've got our default, this basic operations, okay? And then we have these other exports of add, right? We're just exporting a variable here of pi. We're exporting this calculator function, right? And then we're also exporting this basic operations here, right? So if we go back over here to our app.js, this basic math, that's actually the default one. This is actually the default one, okay? We're giving it that name. We can give this whatever name we want, okay? Then we're doing a comma, and then within our curly braces, these are the other exports, add, pi, calculator. We have to refer to them specifically like that. Okay? We have to refer to them specifically like that. Calculator, right? Export calculator, so you have to refer to it as calculator. For the add, you have to call it add. For the pi, you have to call it pi. But the other one was the default one, which we just basically have this basic operations here, and we said and we are exporting that. We can call that whatever we want, and as long as we handle this correctly, like this one will be the default one. These other ones are not, right? And it basically says here, importing default export and named exports. Here's our default export. Here's our named exports. Okay. Each module can have at most one default export, like we already said. Basic math is an arbitrary name. We just mentioned that. Chosen for the basic operations object. That is the default export. Okay. Now, just pointing it out, like I said, this lecture is more about JavaScript modules from a just from a JavaScript perspective, not necessarily Node.js, but module entry for like Node applications, the package.json file plays a critical role in how npm packages resolve their module entry points. Specifically, the main or the more commonly, specifically the main or more commonly in modern setups, the exports fields within package.json guides npm and Node.js in determining which file serves as the primary entry point. And we've done that before. We've had our index.js being the primary entry point. We've had server.js being the primary entry point. So that's that's set up, for Node-related applications using that package.json file and having those entry points. So when to use default exports? It makes sense to use default exports when a module's primary purpose is to expose a single functionality. Okay. For instance, in the calculator has a default basic operations because it encapsulates a set of fundamental math utilities. Another reason is you want to offer a clear main entry point to your module. And then, or you desire cleaner import statements. Just a more cleaner way to do that, okay? Exporting and importing multiple items. To export multiple variables, functions, or classes from a module using name exports, you can either list them with the curly braces, like we already seen when we did that in the app, we looked at that, the app.js, or export them individually, as they can be declared individually, okay? So instead of what we did here in the app.js, we could just import add from that, import pi from that, import each one separate statements, okay? To import specific name exports from a module, use the destructuring syntax. Import A, B, that's what, we looked at when we had three of them, right? The PI, the add, the PI, and the calculator. All right. Renaming imports. So now you can also rename your import. You can you can access an import, but you want to call it something different for whatever reasons. Okay. You can rename an import using the as keyword. So you can do here as an example, you do an import original name as new name. And I think we're doing that in this utils.js file. And so let's look at that real quick. Let's see here. I guess we are doing that from the app.js file probably. Oh yeah, right here. So here's renaming an import using the as. So we're, you know, we've got a export called cap text. Let's go look at that real quick. So we export capitalize, and so in here we're importing capitalize and we're calling it cap text. You know, just an example. Not that really makes a lot of sense, but you know, so that's what we're, you know, if you want to go ahead and rename something, you can rename it, and then from here forward, then you would actually refer to as cap text, right? And are we doing that somewhere down here? I think we are somewhere. Maybe not. Yeah, we are right here. So we're referring to cap text, and we're sending it this lowercase, which would obviously return uppercase if we ran this. All right. That's that. Consequences of non-existent name exports. If you attempt to import a named export that does not exist in the module, you will receive a runtime error. Okay. If you're importing everything from a module, you can import all named exports from a module as a single object using the import as name from a module. If you do that, then you can access individual exports as properties of this object, such as that. So as long as you're not referencing that single one that's not real, you'll be fine. It's not. So here, let's just look at that real quick. If you attempt to import a named export that does not exist in the module, you will receive a runtime error. Okay. Well, let's just go look at that. Non-existent export in calculator. Let's get rid of this. Let's find that one. So here on this one, let's see if I uncomment this. It won't complain here. This doesn't exist. But if I run this, I'm not sure what I saved in here, but let me save this one. Let me just get rid of this.